the title of the presentation is actually the title of the edited volume that Tony so graciously invited me to participate in and to co-edit. And I think that in short, I'm going to pose a question and I'm going to answer it right away. And that is the purpose perhaps of the anthology. Do Latinos participate less in political activity in the United States because they are largely Catholic? No. Latinos do not participate any less in political activity because they're mostly Catholic. In fact, for some activities, being Catholic spurs Latino participation in the political arena. The anthology that I outline here this evening seeks to challenge with empirical evidence, collected using different methodologies and at different levels of analysis, the persistent cultural explanations that rely on Latinos' cultural peculiarities to account for their relative passivity in the political realm. Principal among these cultural peculiarities is that religion, specifically Catholicism, becomes an obstacle for full assimilation into American political society. The genesis for this anthology began with a panel at the annual meeting of the Society for the Scientific Study of Religion, Religious Research Association in 2004, to engage with empirical evidence. Sidney Verba, Kay Lemon-Schlossman's, and Harry Brady's influential work, Voice and Equality, Civic Voluntarism in American Politics. So from different perspectives, the panelists challenged some assumptions and conclusions made by the Ivy League research team that had been headed by Dr. Verba. Although the panel had a critical edge about the previous study, there was a general recognition of the importance of voice and equality for studying political participation in the United States. Verba and his colleagues proposed civic voluntarism as a model to move beyond what had been the standard socioeconomic status model of political participation. So while never denying the role of greater income and more education as major factors of political awareness and voting patterns, Verba et al. Had focused upon how contact with and participation in various organizations can elevate political participation. Their model proposed that voluntary associations, including communities of faith, help members acquire civic skills and motivation to engage in political activity. In short, Verba and his colleagues' contribution to political science was to outline how communities of faith, among other voluntary associations, might level the political playing field even when the membership still reflects the socioeconomic disparities that contribute to the stratification of society. Faith communities provide an advantage for political action because they often nurture leadership and civic skills to which the less educated or those involved in less prestigious or complex occupations might otherwise not have access. Communities of faith, as a type of non-political voluntary association, expose congregants to political stimuli. Sermons that explain how the faith should be applied to actual circumstances often foster informal political discussion, or extend a network of friends and acquaintances for organized actions in groups with solid norms of trust and reciprocity. Sometimes churches contribute to political involvement merely by providing a space where congregants may be recruited for political activity. So the panel members, most of whom eventually have contributed their insights to this anthology, did not dispute the key points of the civic voluntarism model. Their critique was delivered upon Verba et al.'s findings about Latinos and specifically about Latino Catholics. Verba and his colleagues reported that while Latinos showed high levels of attendance to church, their involvement in ancillary church activities was low. So they may have participated in Mass, but that was the extent of it. In contrast, African Americans were more likely to develop and practice civic skills, and these civic skills are pretty much communication and organizational skills. The African Americans were likely to develop and practice civic skills acquired in these communities of faith to a greater degree than non-Hispanic whites and Latinos, reducing their disparity in the total number of soft skills they possess relative to non-Hispanic whites. In searching for an explanation of this difference between Latinos and African Americans, who usually occupy the same social space, Verba and his colleagues concluded that, and I quote, part of the explanation for this pattern seems to lie in the fact that Latinos are much more likely than African Americans or Anglo whites to be Catholic rather than Protestant. The panelists at the 2004 academic conference dissected this conclusion by Verba and his colleagues. As noted by David Leal and by este servidor, who the explanation about Catholicism's lowering effect on Latino political participation proposed by Verba was not supported by findings in other important surveys of Latinos and Latinas on political participation. Anthony Stevens Arroyos explained in the Paral study, the Program for the Analysis of Religion Among Latinos, Latinas, they had intentionally posed the same questions used by Verba and his colleagues to heads of faith communities, but had not been able to corroborate the supposed Catholic disadvantage. Moreover, on-site participant observer studies on Latino faith communities were equally challenging to Verba et al.'s characterization of Latino Catholicism. From her observations of the mobilization of Mexican Catholics in Los Angeles, Cristina Mora offered a very different description of the political vibrancy within the church organized to protest unjust immigration laws. And this description of political vibrancy extended to autonomy, motivation, and organization within the church. On the East Coast, Samiria Hernandez reported that the Puerto Ricans believers in Connecticut suffer from few of the drawbacks that had figured in Verba's study on Catholic participation. The purpose of this anthology is then to continue the scholarly discussion that began in 2004, now sharpened by additional research and mutual insights offered for examination in written form. Enriched by the contributions from Frank Ritzy, Matthew Loveland, and Gillian Ruland's study on data on Hispanic Catholic voting in the 2004 elections, the book constitutes a multidisciplinary examination of political mobilization of Latinos and Latinos. Moreover, by examining patterns among Mexicans and Chicanos in California, and joining these studies of Puerto Ricans and Dominicans on the East Coast, this volume gives greater attention to intra-Latino issues than was possible in Verba's initial study. The book ranges beyond the monodimensional reporting. I'm actually going to skip this part and just concentrate on the fact that the studies by Leal and Jones Correa that set out and frame a lot of the conference. They set out to specifically test the hypothesis regarding religious affiliation, attendance to religious services, and political activity outlined by Verba, using, on the one hand, the Latino National Political Survey, which was conducted about the same time as the Verba's survey, as well as the American National Election Studies. These datasets were national in scope, just like Verba's. Moreover, the Latino National Political Survey actually at the time included 90%, covered a sample of where 90% of the population in the United States resided. With these data sets, the scholars were able to test the proposition about Catholicism and political participation, not only among Latinos, but also among non-Hispanic whites. And what Jones Correa and Leal found was that denominational difference did have some explanatory power for Hispanic political participation. So being Catholic did explain political participation, but not in the way that Verba and his colleagues had anticipated. Specifically, they found that being Catholic did not have a statistically significant impact on overall political participation, that is, a collection of different political activities, or voting for president or being registered to vote. So their Catholicism, being Catholic, did not have any impact whatsoever. However, being Catholic did have a statistically significant impact where it turns out to be voting for members of Congress or voting for school board elections, and the effect was positive rather than negative. Among non-Hispanic whites, the denominational affiliation did not have any significant impact either. So these studies from these two datasets contradict the tenets of Verba and his colleagues. On the other hand, Jones Correa and Leal found that the role of churches as civic associations explained political participation to a greater extent than denominational affiliation. Greater attendance to religious services had a positive effect on several measures of political participation for Latinos and non-Hispanic whites, even while holding denominational affiliation constant. This effect was more consistent among Latinos than among non-Hispanic whites. This consistent effect of attendance on Latino participation is derived, Correa and Leal hypothesize, from the centrality of communities of faith as voluntary associations. That is, as non-Hispanic whites have more extensive membership in a variety of civic associations outside of churches or synagogues or temples than do Latinos, churches tend to serve a disproportionate associational role for Latinos. Okay? In the study that I conducted and that is included in the anthology, I used a probability sample of New York City residents, and I found that being Catholic did not have any impact on several measures of political participation either. In fact, being Catholic has no impact on participation among New York City residents and Latinos specifically. When this religious affiliation does have an effect, it is one that promotes rather than impedes Latino political involvement in political activity. Thus, Verva's data are not supported, or his findings are not supported, even when controlling for the effect of attending religious services. In fact, frequency of attendance to religious services has no statistical effect on any measure of political participation among all New Yorkers, including Latinos. Ritchie, Loveland, and Ruland entered the debate by tracing through quantitative analysis the basis for policy positions of U.S. Catholics and establishing how Latino Catholics are a distinct group on this count. Analyzing data collected by Zogby, in this chapter, Catholic and Protestant differences are represented in choices about government-based policies of social insurance, in contrast to a neoliberal-inspired, individual-based capital investment preference. Ritchie and his colleagues found a consonance between the material conditions of Latinos and Latinas and the Catholic Church teachings on social justice. Among Latino Protestants and evangelicals, the social justice concerns were generally overshadowed by political choices made by priority given to family values. Latino Catholics' stronger support for social justice issues manifested through support of the social safety net programs distinguish them not only from non-Latino Catholics but also from Latino Protestants. Such distinctions make Latino Catholics and Latino Protestants distinct constituencies which partisan organizations are likely to explore and exploit. Now, because the focus of this conference resides on religiosity and Puerto Rican studies, I will highlight two chapters that wholly or partially examine Puerto Ricans as subject of study. Chapter 4 of the anthology, entitled Transnational Dynamics in the Socio-Political and Religious Experience of Black Puerto Rican Community in Connecticut, Dr. Samiri Hernandez Hiraldo explores how activities surrounding the celebration of the Santiago Apostol Festival in Loíza, Puerto Rico and New Haven, Connecticut have been used to create a space for recognition of Puerto Ricans of African descent on the island and in the United States, and how, in the process of maintaining this cultural religious celebration, Loiseños have asserted their particular presence and their own representation as citizens of the localities they live in, feligreses in Catholic parishes and dioceses, and migrants between two socio-political spaces. The folk devotion and celebration of Santiago Apostol had taken place at the margins of urbanity and officialdom in Loíza, as it centered in Barrio Medianía Alta instead of the town center, and it contrasted with the Catholic Church Orthodox recognition of St. Patrick's as the municipio's patron saint. The folk devotion and celebration of Santiago Apostol became racialized as a vehicle for the heterodox and quote-unquote atavistic practices to the discomfort of the church's hierarchy, which then attempted to channel it, accentuating their religious practices through masses, and to discount the more popular celebrations such as the Vejigantes masquerade. These tensions coincided chronologically with efforts by a segment of the municipio to split it off as canóvanas, as it eventually happened in 1971, the folklorization and commodification of cultural practices, including those of the black population, and the massive migration of Puerto Ricans towards the United States. In New Haven, Loiseños institutionalized the festivals through a non-for-profit organization called Flechas, which stands for the Fiestas de Loíza in Connecticut, en honor al Apóstol Santiago, that has become a major cultural institution in the city. Self-aware in their goal to document, preserve, and promote the significance of African elements in Puerto Rican culture, Flechas members sought to recreate and experience Puerto Rico while in the United States, but in a manner that highlighted the particularities of Loiseños from other Puerto Ricans as well as African Americans. These black Puerto Ricans were making use of this folk religious festival to assert simultaneously their racial and ethnic identity in the United States. Moreover, given the importance of ethnic pride celebrations in urban politics in the United States, the celebration of Santiago Apóstol, the festival in New Haven, has also made the association an institution for political mobilization among Puerto Ricans that has captured the attention of non-Puerto Ricans as a force to contend with. The second relevant chapter is, my chapter entitled Latinos, Religion, and Political Participation in New York City, where again, I find that Latinos in general and Puerto Ricans in particular are less likely, they do have lower levels of political participation. They turn out to vote in elections at lower levels. They are less likely to contact elected officials than the population as a whole. Although they're as likely or perhaps more likely to engage in protest demonstration and participating in political meetings than the population as a whole. Yet, the reason for the disparity in voting and contacting elected officials among Latinos generally and Puerto Ricans in particular is not because they're Catholic. On this account, Puerto Ricans are not any different from any other New Yorker in terms of their political involvement, as religion is held constant. And this is even the case when holding constant also the frequency with which they attend religious services. And I highlight this last factor because it has been hypothesized that Puerto Rican and perhaps other Hispanic Caribbeans or Hispanic Caribbean Latinos are more likely to be nominally Catholic rather than more fervent practitioners of their faith. Yet, even when holding constant attending religious services, Puerto Rican Catholics do not differ from other Puerto Ricans in terms of their political participation. This anthology contributes to a number of different disciplinary literatures, and I will say in conclusion, this volume will be the first comprehensive work analyzing the political and electoral tendencies of Latinas and Latinos of faith. The collection would be both pioneering and timely in as much as religious identities continue to figure prominently in U.S. politics. It is an area from which there will be a particular informational demand, and this volume would be the first to focus upon religious groups among Latinos and Latinas, thus matching less specific studies on politics and religion. With the quality of the statistical analysis, the relevant charts and tables, insightful community studies, and a comprehensive bibliography, it is the type of text that could be used profitably in many political science courses, in classes of Chicano studies, Puerto Rican studies, Latino studies, as well as specialized volume for seminarians, theologians seeking to understand the patterns of political behavior in the secular square. Thank you.